Welcome to Christ Word, where everyday lives meet the light of God's Word. Here, we don't preach. We tell stories. Moments of doubt, turning points, quiet revelations, all woven with raw emotion and unshakable faith. You're not just listening to someone else's journey. You might just find your own reflection in it. And maybe, just maybe, by the end, you'll discover the answer you've been searching for. He stood there, frozen in the pale white room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows that seemed to expose every nerve under his skin. Nothing looked obviously wrong. And yet, everything felt deeply, terribly off. The thick stacks of paperwork, the endless spreadsheets he had to verify each day. The numbers didn't add up. Budget transfers marked as temporary, funds delayed with vague explanations, and calls during office hours that always ended with a soft laugh or a quiet warning. Then there was that strange smirk from the department head each time he signed off on something he shouldn't have. His name was Min. A civil servant just past 30. His family had once been proud when he landed a job in the provincial government, stable, respectable, a clean career in the public sector, they said. But now Min felt like he was standing in a forest where everyone was blindfolded, and he had accidentally opened his eyes. Every morning, the reflection in the mirror felt more foreign. The light in his eyes, once filled with ambition, now seemed hollow. He used to believe he joined the system to help build the country, that law and truth and justice were values that couldn't be bought. But the longer he stayed, the more those ideals felt like fading echoes in a hollow room. Once, when he refused to approve a suspicious financial file, the deputy director patted his shoulder and said, "Min, you've got to be smart. If you don't sign, someone else will. Don't be too rigid, you'll break." That sentence haunted him. Be smart. Was that just another way of saying, stay quiet? Look away. Go along. He didn't talk to anyone about it. Not because he was afraid, but because he wasn't sure there was anyone left to trust. Until one rainy night, he ducked into a small church on the way home. Not because he was religious, he wasn't. But because that place was always lit, always quiet. He needed silence. A place without fake smiles, without paper trails, without watchful eyes. He sat in the last pew, staring at the old wooden crucifix above the altar, where the figure of Jesus hung nailed to the cross. Rain slammed against the windows. The wind pushed through the cracks of the old building. But Min didn't feel cold. Instead, he felt something strange. Familiar. Wordless. And in that moment, he found himself whispering in his head. "What would you do, if you saw what I've seen?" No answer came. No divine voice from above. Just, a memory. A memory he hadn't thought of in years. He was 16. A classmate had been falsely accused of stealing a teacher's phone. No one spoke up. Min hadn't spoken up. The boy was suspended. And Min never forgot the look in his eyes as he left the classroom, not anger, not even fear. Just quiet, deep hopelessness. Why did that memory come back now? Maybe because, deep down, Min knew. He was witnessing injustice again. And once again, he was silent. He bowed his head, and for the first time in years, whispered to a God he didn't even know if he believed in. "I'm scared, but I know what's right." That night, at home, he found his mother's old Bible, its cover worn, the pages yellowed. He opened it randomly. It landed on a verse. "Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God." Micah 6 verse 8. Those words hit him like a wave. No riddles. No mystery. Just clarity. Do what's right. But what is right, really? And does anyone still care about right and wrong in a world like this? Min couldn't sleep. He started writing, not emails, not official reports, but pages of notes. A journal. Every inconsistency he'd seen. Every time a report had been altered. Every suspicious meeting. He wasn't gathering evidence. He was trying to remember. To remind himself that the truth existed. That he wasn't losing his mind. And then, something strange happened. The next morning, he arrived at work to find a plain envelope on his desk. No name. No sender. Inside, a copy of an anonymous whistleblower complaint, matching exactly what he'd written in his journal. Someone else had been watching. Someone else had seen. But they were too afraid to speak. One line in the letter sent a chill down his spine. "We know you're the only one who hasn't been bought." Who wrote that? Who was "we"? And why him? In that moment, Min realized, he wasn't outside the system anymore. He had been seen. He had been chosen. And now, he would have to choose back. The rest of that day passed in a fog. Min sat at his desk, pretending to work, eyes moving over the screen but registering nothing. The envelope stayed hidden in his drawer, yet it weighed on him like a stone pressing against his chest. Every time someone passed by, he tensed. Every time someone laughed at a distance, he wondered if it was about him. He started noticing things he hadn't paid attention to before, the way a certain manager always walked into meetings just 5 minutes late, clutching a phone he never answered in front of others. The whispered jokes between two department heads. The way some documents moved faster than others, always carrying the same signature, always bypassing certain reviews. But now he wasn't just observing. He was part of it. Whether he wanted to be or not. Min hadn't replied to the anonymous note. There was nothing to reply to. No return address, no instruction, no follow-up. Just the unnerving truth that someone else out there had seen enough to confirm his fears, and considered him a safe bet. But why? That question haunted him for days. He was no hero. He hadn't exposed anything. He hadn't taken a stand. He'd been quiet, careful, afraid. So why him? The answer came one evening when he was walking home. A woman, older, maybe in her late 50s, approached him near a street corner. She wore the kind of clothes that blend into the background, nothing expensive, nothing that would draw attention. She didn't introduce herself. She simply handed him a small slip of paper, looked him in the eye, and said, "Don't stop. You're not alone." Before he could say anything, she turned and disappeared into the alleyway. He unfolded the note. It had a verse. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." Matthew 5 verse 6. That night, Min sat awake for hours. His heart raced, not from fear, but from something else. A calling, maybe. A quiet, insistent voice in his soul that refused to be silenced. But he still didn't know what to do. Exposing corruption wasn't like in the movies. There was no safety net, no clear villain, no guarantee of justice. It could cost him everything, his job, his reputation, maybe even his safety. He thought of his mother. How proud she had been when he got the job. How she'd saved money for his interview suit. Would she understand if he lost it all because he couldn't look the other way? He thought of his friend from high school again, the boy who'd been wrongly accused. Min had stayed silent then. And it had followed him for years. He looked at the Bible again. The pages were still open from before. His eyes scanned down to another line, one he hadn't noticed earlier. "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8 verse 32. Freedom. That word struck something deep in him. Because lately, Min hadn't felt free. He felt trapped. Controlled by fear. Pinned down by silence. He started writing again. But this time, not just for himself. This time, it was a draft of a letter. A formal report. Names. Dates. Evidence. Enough to raise real questions. Enough to force someone to pay attention. He didn't know who to send it to yet. He wasn't ready. But he was no longer just observing. In the following days, he began to act carefully, methodically. He used a personal device to take photos of documents. He printed hard copies and hid them in places no one would think to look. He encrypted files on a USB drive and mailed a copy to a trusted friend from university, someone outside the system. He also started praying. It surprised him, how natural it felt. He didn't know the right words. He didn't follow any ritual. But each night, he would close his eyes and speak. Sometimes only a sentence. Sometimes only silence. Lord, give me courage. And then, one day, everything changed. He was called into the director's office. The tone was calm. The room looked the same. But something in the air had shifted. The director offered him tea, smiled politely, and said, "Min, we've heard some rumors. People saying you're questioning things. Looking too closely." Min said nothing. He stared at the steam rising from his cup. The director leaned forward. "This isn't a threat, Min. Just a reminder. Good people, honest people, they know how to survive. They know how to protect what matters. Family, health, stability. I know you're smart enough to understand that." Min swallowed hard. His palms were sweating. His throat was dry. The meeting ended with a handshake. When Min left the room, he knew. They were watching him. He had been too careful, but not invisible. Someone had spoken. Maybe someone had felt threatened. Maybe someone had guessed. He had two options now: disappear, blend back in, or keep going. That night, as he walked home, he didn't take the main road. He took a long detour through an unfamiliar neighborhood. He needed time, distance, and space to think. He passed by a small church, different from the one he'd visited before. This one had no cross, no neon lights. Just a wooden sign that read, "Those who walk in light may still tremble, but they never walk alone." And for the first time, Min felt something shift inside him. Not peace. Not confidence. But resolve. He was still scared. But he wasn't going to run. Min didn't sleep that night. The director's words kept looping in his mind, soft but venomous: good people know how to survive. It wasn't just a warning. It was a verdict, spoken from the mouth of someone who believed morality was a luxury. A liability. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock. Every second sounded like a countdown to something he couldn't name. He kept asking himself, was it worth it? Was all this worth it? He could stop now. No one would blame him. He had no proof that the letter had reached anyone important. No one outside his circle even knew what he was doing. He could erase the files, burn the notes, apologize quietly, pretend he never saw what he saw. But then, what would be left of him? The next morning, Min stood in front of the mirror, brushing his hair, adjusting his shirt. He didn't recognize the man in the reflection, not because he looked different, but because, for once, there was no avoidance in his eyes. He wasn't pretending anymore. He wasn't numbing himself with silence. He left early, before the traffic thickened. The USB drive was tucked deep in his coat pocket. His hand kept reaching for it, checking it was still there, like it held not just evidence, but a part of his own soul. He didn't go straight to the office. Instead, he took the bus to a nearby city, where an independent journalist he had followed for years worked. A woman named Lon, sharp, relentless, and known for publishing the kind of truths that made people uncomfortable. She had once exposed a local land grab case involving a major corporation. Min had always admired her courage from afar. He didn't have an appointment. He didn't even know if she'd see him. But he had to try. The office was a small room above a printing shop. A receptionist glanced at him skeptically when he arrived. "I just need 5 minutes," Min said, voice low, almost ashamed of his own urgency. She didn't respond immediately. Then, without a word, she walked into the back room. A minute later, Lon appeared. No makeup. Plain clothes. Hair tied up in a messy bun. She looked tired. But her eyes, those eyes, were sharp as ever. You work for the government? She asked. I did, Min said. I mean, I still do. But not for long, probably. She looked at him carefully, then stepped aside. Come in. He sat across from her, the USB drive in his hand. His fingers trembled slightly as he pushed it across the table. I don't have a name for this yet. But I think it's big. She didn't touch it. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Why now? The question pierced through him. He didn't have a polished answer. He didn't prepare a speech. So he told her the truth. I was silent too long. I thought staying out of it meant I was clean. But it didn't. It just meant I was comfortable. She nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. What do you want from me? Nothing, Min said. Just, make it real. If something happens to me, I need to know someone else saw it too. It was the first time he'd said it out loud, that something could happen. That he might not be safe. And still, he felt no panic. Just a cold, quiet certainty. Lon finally picked up the drive. She turned it in her hands once, then slid it into a drawer. I'll read it. If it's what you say it is. I'll publish. But it won't be fast. And it won't be safe. I know. She leaned forward. And you need to understand, if you're serious about this, there's no turning back. Not for either of us. Min didn't blink. I already turned back once. I'm not doing it again. He left without saying goodbye. It wasn't that kind of moment. It didn't need ceremony. That night, walking home, something strange happened. The streets looked the same. The same neon signs. The same food stalls. The same gray buildings. But he felt different. He didn't flinch at the shadows anymore. He didn't lower his head when he passed the police station. He didn't feel like a ghost walking through a life he no longer believed in. He was here. He was awake. A few days passed. He went to work like normal. No one said anything. No sudden meetings. No strange glances. Just silence. And in that silence, a waiting game began. He focused on his work. Kept his head down. But every moment, he was listening. Watching. Preparing. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, it happened. An internal memo leaked. Not from him. Not from Lon. But from somewhere else. It was a vague statement, acknowledging an investigative audit into financial mismanagement. No names. No direct accusations. But the language, it was too familiar. Min stared at his screen. His heart pounded. Someone was moving. The machine was stirring. He checked his email. Nothing. Checked his messages. Nothing. And then, a single text from a number he didn't recognize. You've started something. Now see it through. No signature. No context. But he knew. And deep in his chest, beyond the fear, beyond the uncertainty, a quiet flame had started to burn. It was not over. Not even close. The memo rippled through the office like an invisible wave. No one spoke of it aloud, but the tension was unmistakable. Conversations grew shorter. Laughter faded. Doors that once stayed open now closed more often. Min noticed colleagues avoiding eye contact, even the ones who used to greet him with smiles in the break room. Something was shifting, and not in a way that felt safe. He played the part. Routine. Silent. Focused. But inside, he was on high alert. The silence around him was no longer comfortable. It was the kind of silence that meant someone was deciding what to do about him. That same day, during lunch, he sat alone on a bench outside the building, the winter sun pale and distant. His phone buzzed. A message from Lon. "We need to talk. Tonight. Usual place. 8 p.m. It was short. Direct. No pleasantries. Min's pulse quickened. He knew what that meant. He spent the rest of the day watching the clock. When 5 p.m. came, he left without saying a word, carrying only his coat and a folder of empty papers to look ordinary. At 8 p.m. sharp, he arrived at the quiet cafe on the edge of town, half closed, barely lit, with the bitter smell of overbrewed coffee lingering in the air. Lon was already there, seated in the back corner, her laptop open but turned slightly away from the room. He sat across from her. No small talk. "It's real," she said. Min didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. There are transfers, hidden accounts, contracts with fake vendors. And it's not just one department. It's systemic. Top down. His stomach sank, even though he thought he was ready for it. They've covered their tracks well, but not perfectly. And the names attached to these documents, she hesitated. What about them? They're powerful, Min. People who don't lose. He looked down, hands clenched. Lon leaned in. If I publish this, I won't be the only one at risk. They'll come for you too. You understand that, right? He nodded slowly. And you're still willing? I already made that choice. She paused. Then reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope. Then you need to see this. Inside was a photo. Grainy. Taken from what looked like a building across from his office. Min standing at the bus stop. Alone. The timestamp, 2 nights ago. His breath caught. They're watching you, Lon said. Maybe more than watching. I don't think they know everything, but they're trying to figure it out. And they know you're not playing dumb anymore. Min stared at the photo for a long time. They've already made their move. I can't back out now. Lon looked at him for a long moment, then shut her laptop. Then we hit them first. The plan wasn't grand. It wasn't cinematic. It was methodical, quiet, and grounded in facts. Over the next 3 days, Min stayed out of the spotlight. He called in sick once. Worked remotely the next. Claimed a family emergency on the 3rd. Behind the scenes, Lon and her team were preparing the story. She coordinated with an international outlet, someone outside the country, in case things escalated. The moment the report was published, it would spread fast, too fast to silence. But Min knew what was coming. Exposure was never a clean act. It was always followed by consequence. He prepared the essentials, scanned his ID, sent copies of documents to a lawyer friend out of town, cleared personal data from his home computer. At night, he packed a small bag, just in case. On the 4th day, at 7:42 a.m., the story went live. The headline was blunt. The names were real. The documents were embedded. Lon didn't just tell a story, she showed it. There was no room for doubt. Within hours, the article had been shared across social media, news outlets, and forums. Some comments praised the courage. Others called it a lie. But the fire had been lit. At 10:11 a.m., Min's phone rang. A blocked number. He hesitated, then answered. You made a mistake, a male voice said. Calm. Cold. You think truth protects you. But truth is only power when the right people believe it. The call ended before he could respond. Min stood still, phone still in his hand, breath shallow. He knew this was only the beginning. By midday, security arrived at the office. Auditors followed. 2 senior officials were escorted out for questioning. The building buzzed with panic and disbelief. But Min wasn't there. He was watching from afar, seated in a friend's apartment across town, eyes locked on the unfolding chaos. His phone buzzed again. Another message. It worked. Stay down for now. We'll speak soon. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe he'd never get his job back. Maybe he'd lose more than he imagined. But for the first time in his adult life, he felt like he had stood up straight. He didn't feel brave. He felt free. It had been 2 days since the article went public. 2 days since the machine cracked open. Min hadn't left the apartment. Not because he was afraid, at least, not entirely, but because everything outside felt too loud, too uncertain. His name hadn't been mentioned in the reports. Lon had protected his identity, just as they agreed. But people were already whispering. And whispers travel fast in places built on silence. He sat by the window most of the day, watching the city go on as if nothing had changed. Kids going to school. Vendors shouting over boiling pots. Traffic honking without rhythm. Life moved, like it always did. And yet, in some unseen layer beneath the surface, something was trembling. Min could feel it. Like an earthquake miles below your feet, you don't see the cracks yet, but you know they're coming. That afternoon, Lon finally called. They've started an internal investigation. Real one, this time. The pressure's too big. Too many people watching. Min didn't speak. You okay? She asked. He thought about lying. Saying yes. Saying he was strong. Saying he was ready for whatever came next. But instead, he said the truth. I don't know what I am. Lon was silent for a moment. I get that, she replied. But let me tell you what you're not. You're not invisible anymore. And you're not alone. That mattered more than she could know. But later that night, Min's quiet resolve would be tested. There was a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. He froze. Not the mailman. Not food delivery. He looked through the peephole. 2 men. Suits. Unfamiliar. Clean cut. Waiting. He didn't open the door. Instead, he stepped back, phone in hand, heart racing. But before he could call anyone, one of the men slipped a card under the door and walked away. Min picked it up. A government seal. No name. No message. Just a number. The next day, another message appeared in his inbox. No sender. We'd like to speak with you. No formal charges. Just clarity. Min closed his laptop slowly. They were coming closer. Not kicking the door in. Just, circling. Feeling him out. And he realized, this is how systems protect themselves. Not always with handcuffs. Sometimes with questions. Sometimes with favors. Sometimes with soft offers of silence. He didn't respond. Instead, he called Lon. They know, he said. They've known, she answered. They just want to see if you'll break before they do. He paused. Should I go underground? Lon sighed. If you disappear now, it looks like guilt. If you stay, it's danger. There's no easy way through this, Min. You already chose the hard road. And he had. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he opened the Bible again. Same old pages. Same worn corners. And a single verse that felt like it had been waiting for him. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1 verse 9. He closed the book and stood up. The next morning, he shaved, dressed, and walked out the door. He went straight to the district ethics office. Not with the full story, they already had that. But with one message. I am available to cooperate with any formal investigation. I have nothing to hide. The woman behind the desk looked surprised. No one volunteered for this. Especially not people in his position. She took his statement. Recorded it. Thanked him. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was another crack in the wall. Outside, Min stood for a while under the sun. People passed him. No one knew his name. But that didn't matter anymore. That night, he received another message. From a colleague he hadn't spoken to in weeks. I read it. I saw what you did. I've been scared too. But you reminded me who I used to be. Min stared at those words, unable to move. And that's when he understood something. This wasn't about tearing down a system. It was about making people remember. Remember that silence isn't safety. That fear isn't loyalty. That truth is not an act of rebellion, but an act of return. He didn't know what tomorrow held. Whether more people would stand beside him. Whether the investigations would lead to real change. Whether he'd ever get his life back. But he knew this. The choice to speak had already made him whole. And even if no one ever said thank you, he had stopped lying to himself. The days that followed were strange. Not quiet. Not loud. Just, suspended. Min moved through them like walking across a frozen lake, aware that every step might crack the surface. People had started looking at him differently at the office. Some avoided him entirely. Others stared too long without speaking. But a few nodded. Quietly. Subtly. Like they'd been waiting for someone else to go first. The official investigation had launched, just as Lon said. A government spokesperson gave a statement on the news, "We take these allegations seriously." Min watched it on a blurry television at a local diner. No one else in the room reacted. The words were cold. Scripted. But Min knew better than to expect warmth from the top. Change didn't begin with institutions, it began in the cracks. It began in the people. One afternoon, Min received a letter. A real letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a few short lines. I used to be like you. I knew what was happening. I chose comfort. You didn't. You reminded me that truth has a cost, but silence has a debt. No name. Just a scribbled Bible reference, Proverbs 28 verse 1. He looked it up. The wicked flee though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. Min smiled faintly. Not because he felt bold. But because for once, the fear wasn't owning him. That night, Lon called again. Her voice was clearer than usual. Steady. It's happening, Min. You started a chain reaction. Not just me, he said. You stood with me. She paused. I published it. You lived it. That difference mattered. Reports were coming in from other provinces. Similar patterns. Similar numbers. Whistleblowers reaching out. Quiet at first, then louder. Anonymous at first, then brave enough to sign their names. Min didn't need to be at the center anymore. In fact, he preferred not to be. The story had grown beyond him. That was the point. But just when he thought things might settle, a call came one evening that reminded him how fragile it still was. It was his mother. She had heard rumors. A friend from church had mentioned the article. People were talking. Some proud. Some suspicious. Some afraid. Min, she said, are you in danger? He hesitated. Then answered truthfully. Maybe. But I'm doing what's right. Silence. Then the soft sound of her voice breaking. I didn't raise you to be quiet. I just didn't know you'd have to be this brave. And that's when he let the tears come. Not from fear. Not from exhaustion. But from something deeper, release. Relief. A lifetime of waiting for someone to understand, and finally being heard. He stayed on the line with her until midnight, talking about everything. The boy from high school. The documents. The night at the church. Even the verse he had found. She listened. Not with panic. With peace. And before hanging up, she said something he would never forget. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's choosing what's right even when fear is standing next to you. He slept better that night than he had in weeks. The following day, Min went back to work. The building felt different. Not safer. Not cleaner. Just, exposed. As if the walls themselves knew the lies they had held too long. When he stepped into the elevator, one of the junior staff pressed the button for him, looked him in the eye, and simply said, "Thank you." That was all. Not a celebration. Not a parade. Just truth, spoken plainly. And that was enough. He continued his job for a while longer, but he knew his time there was ending. The work was changing. So was he. A few weeks later, he submitted his resignation. No drama. No press. He wasn't running. He was releasing. Before leaving, he cleaned out his desk, packed a small box, and left a single post-it note in his drawer. Justice begins where silence ends. That was his goodbye. Not long after, Min began speaking publicly. Small groups. Youth organizations. Churches. Schools. Not to be a hero. Not to boast. But to tell the truth, that courage is quiet. That honesty costs something. That if you wait for permission to do what's right, you'll wait your whole life. He never told them every detail. He didn't need to. He just told them that light doesn't need to be loud to break the dark. And people listened. Because they weren't looking for perfection. They were looking for someone who had been afraid, and stood up anyway. Years passed. Min never returned to government work. Not because he was bitter, but because life had taken him somewhere new. He still carried the memories, of silence, of risk, of that moment in the church when he first whispered a question into the dark. But they no longer felt like wounds. They felt like roots. He had become, unintentionally, a quiet voice in the justice movement. Not famous. Not viral. But known, among those who paid attention. Young people often asked him, "Weren't you afraid?" And he always smiled and said the same thing. "I still am. But fear is not the enemy. Forgetting who you are, that's the real danger." He spoke often in places where people no longer believed truth could win. Community centers. University auditoriums. Churches in old buildings with peeling paint and broken pews. One Sunday, after speaking at a youth gathering in a mountain village, a young girl no older than 14 approached him. She had wide eyes and a notebook clutched tightly to her chest. "You said we should never accept injustice," she whispered. "But what if no one believes us?" Min knelt to her eye level. "Then you speak anyway," he said. "Because someone else is watching you. And your voice might be the one that frees theirs." She looked down, then smiled slowly. "I want to be brave like you." Min looked at her seriously. "Bravery isn't something you have. It's something you choose, even when your hands shake." He watched her walk away, disappearing into the crowd. And he thought back to the version of himself who once sat frozen in front of a glowing office screen, paralyzed by doubt. That version hadn't disappeared. He still lived inside Min, quietly reminding him never to get comfortable. That night, Min walked alone under the stars. The village was quiet. He paused by a small chapel on the hillside. Its wooden doors were slightly ajar, creaking gently in the wind. He stepped inside. There was no one there. No music. No sermons. Just stillness. He sat in the last pew, like he had years ago, in a different church, in a different city, when everything had begun. So much had changed. Yet something deeper had stayed. He closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. It wasn't a prayer of triumph. It wasn't victory he felt. It was clarity. He had learned something sacred, not from success, but from survival. Truth isn't a weapon. It's a seed. Sometimes it takes time to grow. Sometimes you never see the fruit. But planting it is never in vain. A breeze drifted through the broken windows, rustling the pages of a forgotten Bible left on the pulpit. Min walked to it, drawn by something unseen. The pages had stopped on a familiar passage. It was the Sermon on the Mount. He read it again. "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Tears welled in his eyes, not from grief, but from recognition. He had walked through fire. But he had not walked alone. Back in the city, people had started to forget. The headlines had moved on. The investigations had slowed. Some were punished. Many were not. The system had changed a little, but not enough. And yet, Min didn't feel defeated. He understood now, justice isn't a finish line. It's a posture. A way of walking. A refusal to bow to darkness even when the light flickers. As he left the chapel, dawn was breaking over the hills. A pale orange cracked the horizon. The world was still imperfect. Still unjust. But he no longer feared that. Because now, he knew who he was. He wasn't a whistleblower. He wasn't a rebel. He wasn't a victim. He was a man who remembered what it meant to believe in truth, no matter the cost. And that would always be enough. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think, reflect, or even feel less alone, don't let the journey end here. At Christ Word, we're building more than just a channel. We're creating a space where truth, faith, and courage can be shared, where stories like Min's become a spark for real change in your heart and in the world around you. So if you found meaning here today, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. What spoke to you most? What would you have done in Min's place? And, what truth are you being called to stand for right now? We're just getting started. New content is on the way, stories of faith, justice, and radical grace. But we want you to be part of that journey. Drop your ideas below. What themes should we explore next? What struggles are you facing that we should bring into the light? Let us know, and come back. Because here at Christ Word, you're not just a viewer. You're part of a movement. We'll see you in the next video. Stay bold. Stay faithful. Stay true.